Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Lost in Translation show, where we explore the past to help people understand what's happening in the world today. Thank you for joining me. It's great to see everyone out there in my virtual world. My name is Simone Anderson, and I'm going to be your host. Today, we have a special returning guest, JUDYTHVARYBAKER. She's a writer, an author, an artist, and she has a very interesting history. So we're going to get right into the show. Before we go there, can you please like, share, and subscribe so we can get all the good news out? Welcome, Judyth.
Hi, everybody.
It's great to have you back on the show. And I know you're doing a bunch of shows today. So you're pretty popular out there. You've got your book out. And so I just kind of wanted to introduce you a little bit. Usually I give a little bit of background, but you have such an interesting story. Can you just tell us a little bit about your life and growing up and how you became the woman that you are today?
A little. All right, you
In
poor
a in a
people.
in a short sentence, yeah.
I'll try.
Okay.
Basically, my father from the beginning was associated with OSS and the CIA, and all that. People won't know that because of his expertise in radio and electronics and advanced stuff in actually color TV, for example. He was working with WGN that put out the first color TV transmission. During World War II, he was working as a ham radio operator. That was kind of like looked like that's a cover that he was doing, but he actually had a network, and they were finding spies, Nazi spies in the United States, who were transmitting stuff by shortwave radio. So I grew up with these people all around me and didn't know how unusual that was. I mean, it wasn't CIA, it was OSS and so on, and then naval intelligence, other things going on, all went completely over my head. And I haven't talked about it much because I couldn't find their family records, and I finally did. So I don't talk about anything I can't back up. All right.
And now, were you born in the United States or
I
where
was
did
born in
your
South
family
Bend,
come from?
Indiana,
Mhm.
right across, practically across from Notre Dame. And my grandmother, who came from Hungary, she had some very good friends there. Our family gave land to Notre Dame. So part of I could actually, if I wanted to, get buried in a tiny little cemetery that's right there in Notre Dame.
Oh, interesting. Well, because I
Yeah.
think, as I recall, you wanted to be a nun when you were growing up.
Oh, yeah. Well, they're a very strong Catholic family and everything. And when they told me I could not have children because I was horribly ill when I was very little, and the nuns took such good care of me. I was in so long, and my parents stopped seeing me. They're very busy, and I don't blame them as far as that goes. But I'm just saying, I became enamored of how kind the nuns were to me, and that stuck with me for a long time. And I just want to say that all through my early time trouble and all that, my grandmother was there, so she was so beloved to me. When she died of cancer, it really got to me. Now, something I'm bringing up recently because I think people need to know is just a couple of weeks after she died, the Hungarian Revolution happened. So we wanted to tell everybody there we were trying that grandma died and all that, and we couldn't get through. We couldn't understand, even though it's USS territory. Well, they're having a revolution. So we tuned in on shortwave radio, and my father, again, had all these radio waves that he could, and we're listening to them begging, "Oh, please, America, you said you'd help us." And these kids, I mean, they're just college kids. And they had knocked over the statue of Stalin. They had even by their bare hands took a tank. And now they were being mowed down. You could hear it being mowed down by machine guns. Help! You imagine how we felt. And later I found that a couple of my relatives died there during the Hungarian Revolution. Their second cousins, things like that. Well, somebody else was listening on October 23rd, 1956, Lee Harvey Oswald. He's listening on his shortwave radio. He just turned 17 a week earlier. The next day, Simone, the next day, he joined the Marines. People don't know that, to fight the Reds. So you look up his record, he joined the Marines on the 24th of October, 1956, the day after the revolution started. I tried to put that on his biography. They wouldn't let me. They erased it in just a few minutes. They don't want the truth coming out.
Well,
So
I noticed
yeah,
patterns years ago. When a few years back, the shooters in these mass shootings were always former military. They didn't have any friends. They usually didn't have a father. I was noticing a pattern, which kind of got me into a lot of this conspiracy because it just was such a repeated pattern. And they always had manifestos. I mean,
yep.
right? And so it made me start looking back in history to these different kinds of episodes. Even when I was researching Trump's shooter that hit his ear, his great great grandfather was one of the three guards that was paid off that was protecting Abraham Lincoln. So you frequently find these same repeated stories and patterns. And if you understand, well, I don't do a lot of genealogy myself, but there's a lot of channels that just do that. And you can start really seeing how generationally some of these same people have been involved, especially sometimes when there's these Patsy situations like you seem to be implying
Well,
with
Lee came from what he calls a military family.
right.
And yeah, and he joined to become a spy. He wanted to do something against the Reds. And well, then unfortunately, that makes it possible to frame him. Just think about it. Is he going to go and betray the whole spy network? They knew he wouldn't. So he's really a hero to me because he didn't say, "Hey, I'm CIA. You can't do this to me." All his CIA contacts over in Russia, they would have killed them all.
Of course.
And of course they would say they would deny because he wasn't really CIA. He was borrowed by the CIA, okay, from naval intelligence.
And we know the
SIMONE.
CIA, if you listen to channels like Michael Jaco and former Navy SEALs, we know the CIA borrows people from different divisions, from retired people who were in different arms of the military. So that isn't a conspiracy theory that, they do use.
And then they have plausible denial. Oh, they weren't CIA. They had nothing to do with this. Of course, they're being used, they're being paid, everything.
Well,
But
so for a few people who don't know, you wrote a book called Lee and Me, and it's
yeah,
about
me and Lee,
Oswald.
yeah,
You were a
and
young woman. You were a
that
biochemist for the
all
CIA.
right.
Why
Me
don't you
and
tell us a
Lee
little about
is
that?
an old book. Me and Lee is an old book. It's 13 years old. Don't get me wrong; it's got everything
Okay.
in it, but it doesn't have color photos. It doesn't have the latest witnesses. It doesn't have all the evidence. So it's Lee Harvey Oswald and me. And this was put out to help pay my medical bills because, and it's very kind of my publisher to allow me to, pay off my bills that way. Because I've been injured and they tried to kill me and it hurt my neck and back and other things.
So
So
did the
I
CIA
just
try
got
to
to let
take
it
you
fix.
out? I know
Well,
you've
I
told
can't
me
say
that most.
CIA. We have to call them nuts, don't we? Crazy people who want to be gone.
Well, I think
Yeah,
you were
yeah.
telling me that a lot of the people you worked with, because maybe we want to backtrack and talk about what you were working on down in Memphis when you were, a
Well,
young
it's
child
New Orleans,
scientist.
New
I love
Orleans.
your story about
Okay.
taking the pass and sneaking into the conference. So do you want to tell the
Oh, well, in
story?
Braden, all right. Well, at the time that we're talking about there, I was living in Braden, Florida, and that's near Sarasota, across the bay is Tampa and all that. And by then, I had already invented a new way to get magnesium out of seawater, an advanced way. And so it took me to the International Science Fair. And there I got all these, they gave me all kinds of information and contacts. And I saw a meeting was going on. I had by this time, because of the people like Dr. James Renier, who was at University of Notre Dame. And again, at Notre Dame, I had many contacts with my grandparents and all that because of our family, excuse me. I've got, I was just thinking, how far can I go and tell you all this in the time we have? Basically, I had a lot of contacts, and because of with the International Science Fair, I actually got my hands on germ-free mice. And he came though from Vienna, right across from Kafuvar, Hungary, anyway, my grandmother knew him, and the family knew him because of his family and so on. So here we go. He's now at Notre Dame, and we had all these contacts, and I get germ-free mice. But at my age, I've been talking about age 16 and a half, I get germ-free mice. When he was working on germ-free roosters and chickens and things and started on mice, I got them before anybody. So now imagine I find that I'm able to induce lung cancer in only 7 days in the pulmonary tracts and the lungs of these mice. Nobody had ever done that. But I've got doctors that don't understand what I'm doing. And here they're having this big meeting. I've got a hitchhike there, and I stormed into the meeting with my stuff because that's where the vice president of the American Cancer Society was, everybody that could have had any kind of understanding, because locally, even though I had good doctors and they were oncologists, they had no idea what I was working with. When the doctors there, like Dr. George Moore of Roswell Park, the oldest cancer research facility in the United States, and then Dr. Howard Deal there, D-I-E-H-L, vice president of the American Cancer Society, in charge of all of the research going on. And then you have Dr. Alton Oxter. They were the three musketeers because they went around telling everybody, look, you've got to quit smoking. This stuff causes cancer. Said, prove it. I come along with material that came from cigarette products and gave mice lung cancer in 7 days. Don't you know they were interested in that? So when I crashed that place and the police were going to go and take me away, there was something about me, maybe because I was the only girl and everybody else is, dressed up in their unit. Anyway, they decided not to kick me out. And at noon, I started showing him my stuff. Dr. George Moore was so impressed, he got in his plane, he was also a pilot, flew all the way to New Orleans, picked up Dr. Oxter and brought him back. They went into my lab. By the way, I had my own lab when I was only 15 at my brain at Manatee High School. But they were so scared of what I was doing after they saw lumps and bumps appearing on the mice that they made me a new lab, and it was built under the stadium. So they're having to look at what I'm doing over there, and I kept meticulous records and all that. I ended up getting fast-tracked. So I'm compressing this, but I ended up working in 3 labs at University of Florida. That's because my father tried to kidnap me actually and get me out of there. He had lost a lot. He was supposed to be on a rocket project and everything. My mother said, no way am I going to, they're talking about that we may have to live separate from you because you might get bombed because the Soviets don't want you working on these rockets and all that. And she said, no, I don't want them to lose their father, and we're not going to live behind barbed wire and maybe get bombed out of existence, by the Russians. So it broke his heart, and he began drinking. Then he couldn't run his businesses and wanted me to do it. So he's trying to kidnap me. My escape route was, I had wanted to be a nun anyway, and that's how he got me. And I escaped from them because my grandfather and my aunt and so on escaped my father. Now I'm at the University of Florida. He's trying to get me again. So I had an awful lot of trouble going on. And my rescuers were these 3 doctors. They had trained me and everything like that, but I had also worked with a very important formula, the RPMI 1640 formula with Dr. Moore. This formula is still used today as one of the best ways to grow cancer. In other words, I had the knowledge to grow lung cancer faster than anybody in the world. And I had the formulas and everything, special training.
And the government was telling you were developing a product to kill Castro, I recall.
Well, what happened with all the special training and all that, when the semesters got out, or a trimester system, I'm out of money. I had huge grants, first semester, second semester. We went on a trimester system. I had nothing for in between, you see, because we got a new system. So I'm out of money. But so Dr. Oxter says, you come to New Orleans you can have an internship. Well, heck, we'll just put you right in at Tulane Medical School 2 years ahead of time. Forget about going to college anymore. And basically, I'd run ahead 4 years. I'd be 4 years ahead. And I'd already taken a bunch of medical classes. All of those have been erased from my roster. You can't, it's all gone. All right. However, talking to me, if I'm in a room full of doctors, they can't tell me from anybody else. All right. Put it that way. All right. So
Well,
anyway,
there was a lot of, as I've investigated these different kind of, especially CIA and kind of what we call deep state, CIA encompasses a lot of different, I think when people say that, there's so many different organizations. I really noticed that they have a lot of activity in New Orleans. I think you were in Memphis also, were you?
no, not Memphis, but however, we're talking about assets that were brought in and so on. Memphis is basically Martin Luther King. You see a lot of stuff going on there with that.
Right.
In my case, they brought me in, Dr. Oxner did, but they were out of town. They didn't realize to come in, I have to come in weeks early. And now I'm there with nobody. I'm an asset. Because I had no money, I moved in the YWCA, the cheapest room they had, till my doctors got back, because there were no papers for me to sign, so they pay for my stuff. And it was with, as I've told many times, 2 strippers, a Playboy Bunny trainee, and this profane waitress, overweight waitress. Well, I took her waitress job, but now this was weird, because who goes and rides 45 minutes way out of town to go to this particular royal castle, work there 2 hours, and go 45 minutes back every morning? Well, I was just paying my rent, till my doctors came back in town. But Lee Oswald and others, it turned out, I didn't realize, he thinks I'm on the secret side that he is on, trying to kill Fidel Castro. Now, why do I say that? At the Royal Castle, that's where Bobby Kennedy had a surveillance team from the Department of Justice. And they're with binoculars, and they're there because it's open 24 hours, day and night. They're watching all the traffic going in and out of Town and Country Motel, which is just a couple blocks down. And that's the headquarters of the Godfather, New Orleans, and all of Texas, and you name it. And Carlos Marcello, and they are surveilling. Now, I'm coming in every morning here, and Lee Oswald's noticing this. He was told to meet me. He's not told very much information, but what he does know is I'm showing up right when the team is shifting. That is, their day team changes with the night, and then it's like I'm there a couple hours, and I'm serving them, and are they feeding me information? Then I take it back. I'm only there a couple hours. So he thought. And on top of that, somebody wanted me to meet him. He's a nice looking guy. He's not a dirty old man or anything. And I'm in kind of trouble. I'm going around with these strippers to nightclubs, and I'm in the back watching put on pasties and all this kind of thing. And there's police raids going on. If I'm picked up, how are they going to use me? So Lee is told.
So were the strippers living at the YMCA?
Yes, the YWCA.
Okay. I was like, how did you get involved with that?
They're there because they were trying to jockey for higher positions. Like one of them was trying to get Jack Ruby, of all people, to hire her so she could go on to Dallas, because that would be a bigger venue. They'd make more money. And if she's really good and slept with him and he liked her, he'd take her to Las Vegas. She could be.
So how is Jack Ruby connected to the strippers? Was he running girls?
Oh, yes, his sister runs a nightclub, and he runs the Carousel Club.
Oh,
but that's just kind of a side thing, though. He actually is a police fixer in Dallas, and he from time to time has to come to New Orleans and deliver the money over to Carlos Marcello, the Godfather. So you've got a lot of, and I'm start getting in the middle of this kind of stuff going on. And Lee is penetrating all this. He was born in the mob. You might say his own mother's sister is married to JUDYTHVARYBAKER, who is an enforcer for Marcello. And Marcello loved the man to death because he beat up everybody on the docks and secured the docks for Marcello. When he gets too old, he gives him a cushy job, just doing bookmaking, making lots of money on horse races, puts his kids through college, says, Lee, I'm your uncle. I will put you through college. And Lee says, no, I'm going to do this through the Marines. So he got his GED through the Marines. And the CIA said they were going to put him through college. I'll tell you, in July, when it turned out they decided not to, Lee then knew the handwriting was on the wall, that he was expendable. He began to get very suspicious how the CIA was using him. And so he starts penetrating. And he's realizing that they can actually use him as a patsy, because he had spent more than 30 months in the USSR, almost 3 years as a spy. And then he's brought back, and they're setting him up to be very visible, pro-Castro. Now he is actually in a project in New Orleans. I was brought into that project because of my expertise in handling SV40 monkey virus and all that kind of thing. They got to round me up. They sent Lee because they sent some old doctor or something. And what's he going to do? I mean, they thought I was on the other end of this. You see, Ochsner is on the secret side, but he's also on the other side. The project he was working on to kill Castro, nobody's supposed to know about it. Yet I was working with Dr. Mary Sherman. She was the head, she was the very, very head icon of that whole secret project. So she was out of town and I was there. And I said, well, I've been sent in here to work with Dr. Mary Sherman. Where is she? She's with Ochsner out in Latin America somewhere. I had come in early. All Lee had been told, as he told me, is to pick her up, keep her out of trouble, because she's an asset. We don't want anything happen to her. She's important in the project. They didn't tell him that I'm not supposed to be on the secret side. Now Lee is seeing that I know all this stuff. I know Mary Sherman. Mary Sherman's working with David Ferry, and they are both deep in the Kill Castro program. And I'm up there at Royal Castle. Looks like I'm contacting Bobby Kennedy and everybody.
And your dad's OSS.
And it wasn't, yeah. They told him I was an asset, keep track of her till we get back. Never said I shouldn't be on the secret side. So they introduced me little by little. Oh, she knows Sherman. She knows all this stuff. I'm working with the very stuff the project was about. I was an expert in SV40, and that's what the project was about. So they thought I was on the secret side. By the time the doctors came back, it was too late, and I got on the secret side. And here's Lee Oswald, pro-communist, pro-Castro. He is there to protect us because Castro knew something was going on. Too many attempts to kill Castro and come out of New Orleans. And they were even training, CIA was even training insurgents brought in from Miami at Lake Pontchartrain. They trained them and sent them over to Guatemala and pretend the U.S. had nothing to do with the training. They were coming out of Guatemala. Yeah, right. So Castro is, of course, trying to find out. Lee is helping to round up these Castro spies so they don't hurt us. They don't hurt anybody. They're not going to hurt Dr. Ochsner or anybody else. But it turns out that Marcelo, the Godfather, also wants back Cuba, of course. They all did, for their casinos, for their prostitute rings, for their drug selling. Everything was going on. So they're interested in killing Castro too and getting back their corrupt dictators instead. And so they are cooperating. So when Jack Ruby's coming to talk to Carlos Marcelo, they're also talking about, hey, we've got this secret project here. And they're actually giving money. They're even siphoning money. It costs a lot of money to kill 150,000 mice and bunches of monkeys and all the things that were going on, and analyzing everything and finally testing it on humans. So, that's where my ethics came in and got me in so much trouble because, so Ochsner talks to me, says, okay, look, your boy's going to be a movie star. He's going to be on TV and all that. We're going to make it look like, he's doing all this pro-Castro stuff, but we're watching and we're photographing and we're filming. It looks like we're filming for WDSU and all that. Actually, we're filming also for the CIA and FBI because people taking these flyers, if they don't throw them away, we're going to follow them. They don't. Now, he actually was out at USS Wasp and other places. It wasn't just the two that you see filmed there. Filming was going on elsewhere, but they didn't want you to know all the stuff that he was doing like that. Lee was on our side. He was pretending, again, to be pro-Castro and all that. And he was protecting us so that we wouldn't get wiped out. Yeah.
Well, I know that I think I read somewhere, and maybe you can confirm this since you know the Kennedys, that RFK Jr. is working on getting Sirhan out of jail here in California.
Well, you can't get him out. They're not going to let it happen.
Well, they would never let that happen,
No, never.
even though he says he has the proof that he didn't do it, or
Oh yeah, everybody knows he couldn't possibly because he was like 3 feet away. The closest he was, he shoots two, and the two of them hit, but they they hit people around him because he was shooting wildly. Then he fires off altogether 8 shots, but they're in all kinds of different directions. But Noguchi, the coroner, okay, he's standing behind. He's looking. Somebody was standing behind him. It had to be. They had this new guy that had been hired just the day before and all that, okay? And you can look up their records and all that. But this guy, you've got 4 shots in the back of Kennedy. Two of them are, one of is in his skull. You know what I mean? And you can see nitrate burns. I mean, it's right up against his head. And they're trying, and they blame Sirhan. And they let the other guy, Cesar, okay, Cesar, go free. Now, Kennedy, brilliant as he was, he reached back and grabbed that tie and pulled it off of him. It's on the floor. They cut that out of the pictures they show now, but they used to show the tie. Now AI is saying that the tie was a bow tie from that kid who was holding RFK in his hands. They're changing it around right before my eyes and saying it was a bow tie that was pulled off, which it was not. And of course, they don't show you, so you have to go back to old photos and see it's a full-length tie. All right. And the kid was never wearing a bow tie to begin with. Okay. He was like a porter. And he's cradling Kennedy in his arms. And Kennedy, you know, his last words were, "Is everybody okay?" And he said, yes, they were. And then Kennedy passes into unconsciousness. That's the kind of man we had that they killed.
why
and
do
that's the
you
kind of
think
man
that
RFK
they do
is.
these in such high profile? I mean, right, I was just on a show earlier this morning and I was talking about these mass worldwide trauma events. We had the Charlie Kirk event, which took the
Yeah.
for 6 weeks. And in Asia, there was the murder by well, everyone thinks it's a murder. It was a supposed suicide after a high CCP related to Xi Jinping was raped and murdered. And that has taken the news cycle for 6 weeks there. So whenever I'm seeing, like after the Kennedy assassination, what did they do? They raided the Social Security Fund so they could fund, I mean, among other things. But that was a big move in the financial system. And then when Nixon had all of his high trauma and all that, you know, today everyone knows that you record. No one goes to a law office and expects it not to be recorded in the background. He recorded but after that, then they took us off the international gold standard. And within a few, you know, in that 10-year space, there was dramatic change. So I was pointing out, we need to be looking at not this mass trauma event, even though it's really affecting.
Digital ID, you'd better look at
Exactly,
digital ID.
They're employing it all over Europe. I think England's just said you're going to have it. In the World Economic Forum, my point is they have us marching. You know, they create a mass trauma event.
Yep.
And then even still to this day, my whole growing up, you'd look at the magazine article, who killed Kennedy? Who killed Marilyn Monroe? All of these same stories that seem to trigger people and get us in a point where we're emotional and we can't logically look at whenever this is going on, I go look over. So
Well, my dear, psychologically, the first information you hear that seems to come from an authority figure is what sticks in our heads the most. Then you have to work on, and then if you decide that's true, it's almost impossible to change their minds, because what happens is then you logically fight against, say, don't change my mind. I know what I see. It becomes very difficult. You can't fight them. If you fight them, they get even more entrenched. What you have to do is ignore them, go to the new generation. Now, they are enemies of our country, know this, so they work on education. That is the key, to educate them properly about what really happened. If they don't get that,
that's why we're both here today.
Yep. And I love our young people. They're brave. They're not being directed properly. What do? They they have to mess up their identity, because when you're a strong young man or woman, all right, you have a cause, you'll give your life for that. Well, not if you don't know if you're a man or a woman.
Well, they've also created a lot of, the victimhood, but because of the breakdown of society in general, there's all these people that are searching for love and belonging and things we used to find. It used to be, I mean, my grandfather had 12 siblings. I mean, getting together every weekend, it was like a whole big event, right? But we don't have all those
When you
things.
break up the family,
We don't.
you have to take their religion away, because the religion has all these different factors so you can meet, whether it's Christmas, Easter, or whatever. It is the fabric for the culture. You destroy the culture, you've got to make them hate Abraham Lincoln.
Right.
You've got to make them hate. Hate is so much stronger than love, because we fight trauma all the time. And only love can overcome and help us to forgive and forget, because hate will fester it, and it will make it grow and grow until it's completely out of control.
Well, and that's what they're doing to us, right? They're
That's right.
dividing us in every way.
Division.
When you were younger, it was the male-female thing. Well, that is still working really well in most parts of the world. I come from a family, we had traditional marriage, but the women were the strong ones in the family for generations. So we learned to respect the women and the men. I mean, this thing where it has, so you were in the generation where they turned men and women against each other. And then,
well, actually, I was born in 1943. And at that time, women were actually dressing like women. Men were dressing as, male icon figures. You had all the great cowboys out there. Like, who's heard of Tex Ritter anymore? This masculine voice, Ghost Riders in the Sky. Now, we're having on October 18th. Very important, and I hope that this gets out before that, or at the same time. But we're having a big birthday bash on October 18th on X.
Okay, on X. Do you want to give us
on X? On X at Judyth. It's at JUDYTH. Everybody come. You're going to have we're going to have all those favorite songs that Lee had, and they are such masculine songs. It'll show you the kind of character he had, and you're going to find out what he read, and some of the things that I learned about him, why I fell in love with him, and how smart he was. And you're not going to hear any, they try to make him out that he was stupid, that for no given reason that he decided to kill Kennedy. Then they said that he wanted to get fame. And yeah, that's why he said he was a Patsy and didn't do it, because he wanted fame, right? Yeah, that's what everybody does.
Well, why do you think they could have killed him in so many ways? I mean,
no, they wanted a public execution.
Okay.
They hated him so much. They wanted to make sure it was public, that there would be enough information there that they could handle. But see, they worked very well, because who were the police? Who were the police being run by? Well, we have to go back. Who was the mayor of Dallas at that time? If you've ever heard of course, Alan Dulles, was the head of CIA, and he gets fired by, who is his number 2 guy?
George Bush.
No, his number 2 guy, his first name is Charles, and his last name is Cabell, Cabell. The mayor of Dallas is his brother, Earl. They're both CIA. Earl ran the police before he became the mayor. So he's got the police in his pocket, and they'll do whatever he wants. And they're having, and you have Alton Ochsner hates Kennedy, but Ochsner had met Kennedy the year before and was in charge of his motorcade. Ochsner was. So he knows all the things about medical. He makes sure that the press car is way in the back. Now, I have to say that I'm going to try and defend Ochsner a little bit. He sincerely believed that Kennedy was a Catholic, and that was not good right there, but he was also a communist and soft on the Reds. He really believed this, and he was being indoctrinated. His land that he built his famous clinic on, he purchased that from Murchison, who was the oil guy, along with a lot of others, hated Kennedy because Kennedy's going to give him taxes. Instead of oil depletion allowance and security from extra tax, he's going to slam it to him, because oil depletion thing turns out not to be true. There's so much oil that we're still pumping out endless oil, okay? So all that was a joke, sort of like climate change, all right? So he's got that going on. And Murchison, who's his best buddy? Murchison buys tons of land, penny on the acre, from the Godfather. And he sells this, pennies on the land, almost donates it to Ochsner. Now, Ochsner, and you've got the oilmen, and you've got the mafia all working together in Dallas, Texas, okay? And there they are. We have Jack Ruby coming in from New Orleans. You know, money is coming from the mafia to this project to kill Castro. I think everybody wants Castro dead. And there we go again. Kennedy's the way. He refused to bomb Havana. Even his own brother wanted Havana bombed. All right, we've got to get rid of these guided missiles. If they'd done that, there's no doubt that we would not have New York, San Francisco, all kinds of places, because the rest of the ICBMs, they didn't have as many as we did, but they couldn't have stopped them all. And we would have had, well, the military said we'd only lose 20 to 30 million people. They would, and Russia would lose more. So we won. No, you got radioactive waste and everything. Many, many more would have died. Only Kennedy said, we're not going to do this. And so they decided they're going to snuff out Kennedy. That is where it started. And he was so angry that he'd been fooled, and he had to take the blame for this. When they already set this thing up so that if he didn't bomb, he would look real bad, Kennedy would. So now Kennedy fires Dulles, he fires Cabell, who were responsible for trying to blackmail him, all right? They're not going to let that pass. Allen Dulles was fired like over a year before Kennedy's shot. That's a word we're not supposed to use on YouTube. Okay, but anyway, when that happened, at that time, when that happened, why do you think, who would profit from this? Who would be most motivated? Well, I'll put it this way. Castro's the last person that would have wanted to kill him. Why? Because Castro knew that Havana got spared. It's Kennedy that said, let's do something else. I've got the papers showing that everybody, even Bobby Kennedy himself, was against the idea that we should just go ahead and bomb Havana. We would have all been, well, it would have been the end of civilization as we know it. And that's the man they wanted to get rid of. Lee Oswald told me some of this. He knew so much on the inside because he practically worshiped Kennedy's irony that they're going to go and blame him. You go look at when they tell him he's been charged. He understood he could be charged with the murder of a policeman to get rid of him. But there's almost a shock on his face because they didn't tell him any of that. You think they were interrogating him, but they were interrogating about the murder of Kennedy. It was all about everything else. They made him sit there and write over 10 pages. People don't know this. He's been all beat up. He can hardly see. He's not eating. They're saying he's resting. No, they made him write 10 closely of everything he ever did. You know, when he was in the Soviet Union, his whole life story. They're not even telling him. Then he comes out there and finds out he's been charged. His face and the disgust and the irony of it. He is the one, as he told me in our last conversation. And it was so heartbreaking, our last conversation. He said, you know, I believe I saved Kennedy's life 3 weeks ago. That's right on top of what happened in Chicago when an informant called in and made sure these guys got arrested who were going to kill Kennedy. And the name of that informant was Lee. And you're telling me that wasn't him? Abraham Bolden thinks so. We have James Douglas, everybody who looked into it. And of course, I'm telling you as well, Dr. Mary Sherman came from Chicago, okay? Jack Ruby did. And by then they were friends with Lee. And Jack Ruby did not hate Kennedy at all. He was pretending because of Carlos Macello. He can't say, hey, I like Kennedy. That's the end of Jack Ruby. But they finally figured it out. So they go and make sure Jack Ruby has to go and shoot Lee Oswald, who was somebody he knew from the time he was a child, because remember, Lee's mother's sister was married to the mob. And Lee went as a kid, just like you see in The Godfather, all those weddings and all. Jack Ruby is there from day one. He was sent down from Chicago, okay, from that mob to work with Joe Savello in Dallas. Savello got taken over by Marcella. So there you go. And we have Currington, who is the secretary for Murchison, okay? Again, the Murchison who's basically running Elton Oxford. A lot of this is not Oxford's fault. He has been brainwashed to think that Kennedy is so evil. But Murchison has got him, in his pocket. He's after all got all that land for him. They've just moved in March, not March of '63. He's moved everything out of. It's all out. It's all over there in Jefferson Parish now. In New Orleans, just outside of New Orleans. Everything's there. Everything that Oxnard wants, Murchison and all that cabal, they're in on this. They're telling him stuff to make him hate Kennedy. I think he would have been a different man if he'd ever got input from anybody else. So I can't blame it as much as I want to.
You mentioned like Dulles and some of those people. Are you familiar?
Yeah, Dulles didn't even, excuse me, just so you don't forget, when Dulles is fired, he's still cleaning out his desk a year later. He is still there and he's running everything. Yeah.
Well, are you familiar with the 5-Star Trust, George Bush Sr., Dulles, forget what the airport, McCarran, and they had this plan because his George Bush Sr.'s father had financed the Nazis and they wanted to implement the one world, the United Nations goal, right? One world order, one world government, one world religion, and that was going to be the 5-Star Trust. They took a lot of the assets and that's what they were using to fund. You can still go, like in Nevada, you can still go to the 5-Star Bank. That trust still exists. But they had a plan for those 5 or 6 men to repeatedly be president.
And you see that fight. Where was that 5-Star? Where was that located?
Well, it was formed by Dulles, but I saw it one time. I was listening to a show and I just look up and I see the bank, the 5-Star Bank, and I'd just been listening. And of course, when the Union Bank, and I started looking into it. So they had this trust where they were going to each be president and bring about the New World Order, the 1,000 points of light speech that George Bush Sr. makes and all of his talk about the one world order. So they were going to implement